Imagine a 15-year-old boy committing crimes so brutal that they forced an entire country to rethink its juvenile justice system. This is the story of Willie Bosket, a name that sent shockwaves through America's legal framework. His violent actions in 1978 led to one of the most significant changes in U.S. law, allowing juveniles to be tried as adults for serious crimes. But how did a teenager gain such notoriety? Was it his environment that shaped him, or was he simply born to be a criminal? In this documentary, we'll explore Willie Bosket's troubled past, the crimes that shocked New York, and how his legacy reshaped the justice system forever. In the annals of American criminal history, few names carry the weight that Willie Bosket does. Born in 1962 in Harlem, New York, Bosket's name became synonymous with a brutal reality, the harsh consequences of a broken system. Willie Bosket, at the age of 15, committed crimes so horrific that they changed the entire juvenile justice system in the United States. His actions in 1978 were not only shocking, but also led to the establishment of new laws concerning the prosecution of juvenile offenders, leaving an indelible mark on the American legal framework. This documentary aims to explore the roots of Bosket's crimes, the chilling details of his violent actions, and the lasting impact his life had on the law. Willie Bosket was born into a family marked by generational violence. His father, James Bosket, was a convicted murderer who spent much of his life in and out of prison. James was a product of a violent family legacy. His own grandfather and father had both committed murder. This history of crime set the stage for Willie's upbringing. From an early age, Willie was surrounded by violence. His mother struggled to care for him and his siblings, while his father remained mostly absent. Willie's early life was chaotic, filled with neglect and instability. Despite this, there were signs that Willie was different from other children. His temper was explosive, and he showed an early interest in power and dominance. By the time he was 6 years old, Willie had already been arrested for petty theft. His behavior was troubling, yet the system failed to intervene effectively. Even at such a young age, Willie had a sense of invincibility. He knew that as a child, the law would treat him leniently, and this belief only fueled his violent tendencies. By 8 years old, Willie was no stranger to fights, and his criminal activities slowly escalated from theft to more serious offenses, such as robbery. At school, he was often involved in altercations with other students, showing no remorse for his actions. The criminal behavior wasn't just learned, it was part of his family's culture. As Willie entered his teenage years, his criminal activities became more organized and more violent. By 11, he had already started carrying weapons for protection and, as he later revealed, for intimidation. At this stage, Willie began committing more serious crimes, including muggings and assaults. At 12 years old, Willie stabbed another boy during a schoolyard fight. Though the victim survived, this incident showed a clear pattern of violence. But it wasn't just physical aggression that set Willie apart. It was his lack of empathy. He saw violence as a tool, not as something to be ashamed of. This mindset continued to develop as Willie got older. By 1974, at just 12, Willie joined a gang, further escalating his involvement in crime. He began robbing local businesses, often using a gun to threaten victims. Willie had learned that he could get away with much more than his peers. The system at the time was reluctant to punish juveniles harshly. Juvenile offenders often faced only short stints in correctional facilities. This leniency encouraged Willie to take more risks, as he believed that there would be little to no serious consequences for his actions. The subway murders. The crimes that shocked New York. Execution date 1978. At 15 years old, Willie Bosket committed a series of crimes that would forever change the juvenile justice system in America. His crimes in 1978 were not the result of a specific motive, but rather the product of his growing belief in his own invincibility and power. March 19, 1978. The murder of Noel Bolden, Willie's first murder, occurred on March 19, 1978, when he fatally shot Noel Bolden, a 34-year-old subway passenger. The murder was completely unprovoked. Willie shot Bolden in the head with no warning, simply because he wanted to assert control. There was no robbery, no argument, just an unrelenting act of violence. After committing this murder, Willie fled the scene. But unlike the earlier, smaller crimes he had committed, this was a significant turning point. The authorities immediately began investigating the murder, and Willie became a prime suspect. However, Willie wasn't worried. He believed that being a juvenile would keep him out of prison, as the law at the time would not treat him as an adult. March 27, 1978. The murder of Moises Perez. Just 8 days later, on March 27th, Willie struck again. His second victim was Moises Perez, a 36-year-old commuter. Like the first murder, this was completely random and unprovoked. Willie shot Perez in the subway, killing him instantly. Willie showed no remorse. He simply walked away, knowing that he would likely be able to get away with it because of his age. Attempted murder and armed robbery. In addition to the murders, Willie also committed multiple other violent offenses around this time. He attempted to murder a third victim but failed to kill him, and he also participated in armed robberies, stealing from subway passengers. These crimes were all part of a larger pattern of escalating violence that Willie had been engaging in for years. He began bragging to his friends that he was untouchable, and he relished in the fear he caused in his victims. Willie Bosket was arrested in April 1978, just weeks after the subway murders. But there was a major issue with his case. Willie was only 15 years old. Under the law at the time, juvenile offenders could not be sentenced to life imprisonment, regardless of the severity of their crimes. This meant that Willie could potentially be released from prison as young as 21 years old, despite committing brutal murders. Willie himself was bitter and defiant during his arrest. He told police officers that he would be out in 5 years and that he would kill again. His words were chilling. People across New York were outraged. How could the system allow someone who had committed such heinous acts to potentially walk free? The public's anger eventually led to a major legal reform. The system had clearly failed Willie Bosket, and it had failed society as well. The shockwaves of his crimes led to immediate and widespread changes in how juveniles who committed violent crimes were prosecuted. In 1979, in direct response to Willie's case, New York State passed the Willie Bosket Law, which allowed juveniles as young as 13 years old to be tried as adults for certain crimes, including murder. This marked a historic shift in how juveniles were treated by the justice system. It sent a message that violent offenders would no longer be able to escape punishment simply because of their age. This reform had a profound impact on the way juvenile crime was viewed. It was no longer enough to excuse violent behavior based on a child's age. The law recognized that certain crimes were so severe that even young offenders should face the full consequences of their actions. After serving time in juvenile detention, Willie was transferred to adult prison at the age of 21. However, rather than rehabilitating, Willie's violence only escalated. In 1985, Willie stabbed a prison guard. In 1987, he attempted to set his cell on fire in an act of self-destruction. He continued to assault other inmates and engage in violent confrontations, proving that his violent tendencies had only worsened with time. In 1990, he took a prison guard hostage, further cementing his reputation as a dangerous and unrepentant individual. As Willie Bosket's life sentence continued in the brutal environment of Southport Correctional Facility, the notorious criminal remained in the public eye due to his violent tendencies and the legal reforms his case had inspired. However, just as his life seemed to spiral deeper into violence, an eerie calm settled as he approached his final years behind bars. Though Bosket is still alive today, his life behind bars is marked by isolation and a continued streak of defiance. Unlike some criminals who face the death penalty or have specific last meal requests, Bosket's life sentence offers a different kind of finality, one marked by deep reflection. But his case did invoke an eerie parallel to the last meal tradition commonly associated with death row inmates. While Bosket never had an official last meal request, the concept of finality is prevalent in his story. The question of what he would choose for his last meal if ever given the chance remains speculative. But considering his complex and cold nature, many assume he would opt for something simple yet indulgent, perhaps a high-calorie meal reflecting the fast-paced, gratification-driven life he led. A fast food meal of burgers, fries, and a soda, something that contrasts sharply with the violence he was responsible for. When it comes to last words, Willie Bosket's history of defiance and lack of remorse has shaped his response to moments of confrontation or reflection. While he never faced execution, His last words would most likely embody his defiance against the system that tried to contain him. His words throughout his life were filled with arrogance and anger, often aimed at the justice system that failed to restrain him. In interviews, he often expressed no regret for his actions, even as they continued to define his life. His last words would likely reflect that same defiance, perhaps something akin to, "I did what I had to do," showing his belief that the world owed him nothing and that his violent actions were justified in his mind. Despite being a man who lived out his entire adult life behind bars, Bosket's legacy is not one of remorse or redemption. Instead, his story serves as a chilling reminder of the flaws in the juvenile justice system and the dangerous effects of a lifetime of neglect, violence, and misguided systems of rehabilitation. His case remains an unsettling example of how deep the roots of crime can go, and how one individual's actions can leave a permanent mark on a society's legal framework. Willie Bosket's life story is one of undeniable tragedy, not just for the victims whose lives were taken, but for the man himself, shaped by an environment that failed to nurture him into a better path. His legacy goes beyond the crimes he committed. It lies in the shifts he caused in the law and the questions his case raised about juvenile offenders. While Willie Bosket remains a convicted murderer, his role in shaping the juvenile justice system is undeniable. The Willie Bosket Law, which allowed for juveniles to be tried as adults, marked a pivotal moment in the American legal system. The law has been instrumental in how the justice system deals with young offenders, especially in cases where the crimes are so severe that rehabilitation seems out of reach. However, Bosket's life also serves as a cautionary tale. It raises questions about the adequacy of juvenile detention and whether a system that is too lenient on young offenders can ultimately lead to tragedy. It challenges us to consider the root causes of juvenile crime. Is it just a product of the environment, or is it a deeper issue of personal choice and mental health? And most importantly, it forces us to ask whether justice for victims and accountability for perpetrators can ever truly be served when a system fails to recognize the long-term damage done to children from abusive, neglectful, or violent upbringings. As we reflect on the life of Willie Bosket, we find ourselves at a crossroads in the discussion about crime, punishment, and rehabilitation. Was Willie a product of his environment, or was he simply a dangerous individual who chose violence? And should he have been held fully accountable from the start? His story also raises critical questions about the nature of evil. Is it something inherent, or does it grow from a lifetime of mistreatment and neglect? What role does society play in producing criminals like Bosket? And how can we, as a society, prevent more children from becoming like him, trapped in a vicious cycle of violence and hopelessness? These are questions without easy answers. But what we do know is that Willie Bosket was a man whose actions will never be forgotten. His crimes reshaped the law. His legacy endures in the hearts of those who remember the victims of his violence, and his life serves as a haunting reminder of the dangers of a broken system.